My name is Chris Rourke. I'm the CEO of uservision, and we are a user experience and service design consultancy doing various things from user research, experience design and prototyping, lots of usability testing and other forms of evaluation, and doing quite a lot of work in accessibility. And within that world of accessibility, two of our main consultants that are leading it are going to be the speakers today. That's Keith Allen and Harjeet Danda. And they have done lots of works in auditing websites, doing testing with people with disabilities, doing training, things such as this to either directly evaluate the accessibility of a digital property or to help clients to be better prepared to manage that challenge. And I'd like to wish everyone a happy Global Accessibility Awareness Day. This is an annual event where the people behind GAD, as its acronym would be, are really trying to raise awareness and develop skills in the world of accessibility, particularly in our case, in the world of digital accessibility for websites, apps, and other channels. So happy Global Accessibility Awareness Day. We're going to start the talk. It's about WCAG 2.2. As you might know, it's something that's in the works. It's imminent to be actually released. The dust has not settled on it. I believe there's been some fairly recent changes to it, as Keith and Harjeet will explain. And it's very much of interest. As we've seen in over the past 20 or so years, the awareness of accessibility and the skills and the actual, more importantly, the application of accessibility skills to improve websites has gone up tremendously. And this is adding some new challenges to that, some new guidelines, as we'll be hearing about that. Just in terms of housekeeping, if you could keep yourself on mute until we might have a bit of a discussion at the end, that would be great. And you can also use the chat. So if you have any questions, feel free to add those into the chat, and I'll keep an eye on that. And towards the end of the talk today, I'll take a look at those. We can ask the questions. If you're still around, we can take you off mute and you can ask the question yourself, perhaps. And throughout this, I'd encourage you to think how all of these changes in the accessibility guidance that are forthcoming with WCAG 2.2 might impact on your own site or your own digital channel. And let us know if there's any impacts. If you'd like to discuss that any further, obviously, we'd be glad to do that. But with no further ado, I will hand over to you, Keith and Harjeet, to start telling us about the path to WCAG 2.2.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Chris. So Chris has done a fantastic job of covering the first few slides that I've got here. So that's perfect. First of all, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today for today's breakfast briefing. As Chris has mentioned, we're going to be talking about the path to WCAG 2.2. As Chris has mentioned already, the housekeeping has been covered already, and the session should last around 45 minutes with around 15 minutes at the end, okay? So as Chris has already mentioned, happy Global Accessibility Awareness Day to everyone. If you're not familiar with GAD, it's a global event that shines light on digital access and inclusion for people with disabilities. And if you've not been on the website, please do check it out. Today there's hundreds of virtual events that you can attend and get involved in. And we've got a link for that website at the end of the slide deck. So a little bit about myself. My name is Keith Allen. I'm a UX consultant working within the accessibility team at uservision. And as Chris has mentioned, I've worked on, it feels like hundreds of accessibility audits in my time with uservision, working with public sector clients, private sector, financial sector, and third sector organizations as well. And yeah, as he's mentioned, I've also been involved in usability testing with disabled people, along with training and mentoring as well. And this is my colleague Harjeet.
Good morning, everyone, and happy Global Accessibility Awareness Day to you all. So yeah, my name is Harjeet Danda. I'm a UX analyst within the accessibility team. So similar to Keith, I worked on a number of accessibility audits, delivered accessibility training, and worked on usability testing with disabled people as well. That's just a wee bit about me. I'll pass you back to Keith now.
Thanks, Harjeet. What we're going to cover today is we're going to look at how WCAG 2.2 affects current UK accessibility regulations. And then the main chunk of today's session is looking at WCAG 2.2, the new success criteria with some best practices and some practical examples as well. Okay, so how does WCAG 2.2 affect current UK accessibility regulations? First off, we'll talk a bit about the web content accessibility guidelines. So they've been the de facto web standard for web accessibility for the past 21 years. And they're designed to be technology agnostic. So that's, we're not just talking about web content here, we're also talking about other technologies such as mobile apps. We're looking at smart TVs, we're looking at wearables and things like that. So it's for current and future technologies, okay? We're currently on the working draft of WCAG 2.2. This was first published in early 2020, and it's been updated up until this point with feedback from the accessibility community. I think there's a GitHub issues page where people provide their feedback, and it's been amended and updated accordingly. And I've also mentioned here that it's going to be updated to WCAG 3.0 in 2023. Now, this is worth mentioning as it's quite a big piece of work in progress. There's a new structure for making web content accessible. It's quite similar to the web content accessibility guidelines, but it's actually the World Wide Web Consortium, W3C, accessibility guidelines. So that is to be released in 2023. So again, that's still in its development stages at the moment. But today, as I mentioned, we're going to be focusing on WCAG 2.2. So within WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, there are 3 levels of compliance. So there's level A being the lowest level of compliance, you've got level AA, and then level AAA, which is your highest level of compliance. And the guidelines state that websites or mobile applications can be made more accessible by using the POUR principles. So that's perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Okay, so perceivable, do I know something exists? Operable, can I interact with it? Understandable, do I know what it means and can I act on it? And these 3 elements of the web content accessibility guidelines are very much user focused. And the final principle, robust, is to do with the technology and the code and things like that. So we're looking at clean code and has everything been assigned a name role value. So for each guideline, there are testable success criteria which allow organizations to assess their digital products and to see if they conform with the guidelines. Okay, so with each version of WCAG, there's new success criteria added to previous versions. Therefore, each iteration is backwards compatible. So if we look back to WCAG 2.0, which was released in 2008, that comprised of 61 success criteria in total. So that's level A, AA, and AAA combined. Looking forward, well, actually looking back now to WCAG 2.1, which was released in 2018. There was a total of 78 success criteria. So we've got 17 new success criteria added on to WCAG 2.0. And then we're looking at WCAG 2.2. Now what we're looking at here is 9 new success criteria, which have been added. So, you know, you still have to know everything there is to know about all the previous success criteria. But I'll break it down for you here. So there's 4 new success criteria for level A, 4 new success criteria for level AA, and 1 new success criteria for level AAA. And W3C, so that's the World Wide Web Consortium, they encourage you to use the most recent version of WCAG when developing or updating content or accessibility policies. Okay, so looking at the current accessibility regulations in the UK, we have the public sector bodies, websites and mobile applications accessibility regulations, which came into force on 23rd of September 2018, and that's in the UK and in Europe as well. This legislation states that you must make your website internet and mobile applications accessible. And they introduced some deadlines for that. So there was new websites in September 2019. There was existing websites, they had to make their website accessible by September 2020. So both of those deadlines have passed. However, mobile applications, the deadline for that is the 23rd of June 2021. So if you do have a mobile application and you're a public sector organisation, you need to focus your attention on making that accessible by that deadline. And to comply with these regulations, you have to comply with WCAG version 2.1 to level AA. So that was the version that was released in 2018. And you also have to publish an up-to-date accessibility statement on your website or the place where you download the application as well, to comply with these regulations. So looking at adopting WCAG 2.2. Complying with WCAG 2.1 is the current legal requirement for public sector websites. And WCAG 2.2 will be a W3C recommendation as of June 2021. Now, as WCAG 2.2 has not been finalised, it's currently a watching brief on whether the UK will update their legislation once WCAG 2.2 has been released. Okay, but conforming to WCAG 2.2 better meets the needs of users with disabilities than previous versions. So that is version 2.1, 2.0 and 1.0. And by addressing the new success criteria, it's a great way for you to exhibit your organisation's commitment to accessibility. Okay, so what's new with WCAG 2.2? I've mentioned that there's new success criteria. There's 9 new success criteria there. One of the existing success criteria has been upgraded from a level AA to a level A. So it's kind of highlighting the importance of this one specific success criteria, which Harjeet will cover shortly. And it better addresses the needs of people with cognitive and learning disabilities and low vision as well. So it's a great way to what was in here? They've really pushed the boundaries of these success criteria so that it better meets the needs of these people with these disabilities. And if anyone's looked into WCAG 2.2 already, there have been some updates, as I mentioned previously, and some of the new success criteria have been renamed as well. So that's something that Harjeet will cover as well. But as I say, I'm going to pass you over to Harjeet just now, and she can talk you through the new success criteria.
Okay, thanks, Keith. So yeah, I'm going to go through the new success criteria, and I'll go through some examples and best practices as I go along. So I'm going to start off by looking at visible focus. This is WCAG criteria 2.7, and it's level A in the new working draft of WCAG 2.2. And this falls within 2.4 navigable section within the guidelines. And this really ensures that users are provided with ways to help them navigate, find content and determine where they are. So just looking at this criteria in more detail. So as many of you might already know, Focus Visible is an existing criteria, and it helps users identify which element they're interacting with, which element has keyboard focus using a visible focus indicator. So this existing criteria has changed from level AA to level A. And aside from it being upgraded to level A, there's no change in terms of the actual requirements for this criteria, although this change really does highlight the importance of it being an essential accessibility requirement. And I would say that Focus Visible being located in level A, it does make it better in the sense that further it's more accessible to users, especially users, keyboard users. So it's definitely a benefit there. So I'm just going to move on to the next slide, and here we're looking at a new success criteria. So it's focus appearance minimum, and this is WCAG 2.2, and this is level AA. So this is a new success criteria that's been added to the working drafts, and similar to visible focus that we've just looked at, it falls within the navigable section of the guidelines, ensuring that navigation is easy for users. So looking at this in more detail, so focus appearance minimum defines a minimal level of visibility to ensure that the keyboard focus indicator is clearly visible and discernible. Just to point out, this criteria is closely related to focus visible that we've just looked at, and existing criteria non-text contrast. However, focus visible just requires a visible focus indicator, whereas focus appearance goes further and defines a minimum level of visibility. And with non-text contrast, this requires a component to have a sufficient contrast against the backgrounds in each of its states, whereas focus appearance, which is what we're looking at just now, requires sufficient contrast between the focus and the unfocused state. So hopefully that kind of makes it a bit clearer there. So this criteria defines a minimum level of visibility, and this includes a contrasting area, a minimum area, adjacent contrast, and content shouldn't be obscured. So I'm going to go on to the next slide. Here we've got example, and I'll go through the criteria with you as well. So this slide here, this is an example from the BBC website, and we've got an element on the page receiving focus. So it's a black coloured focus indicator, which has a contrast ratio of at least 3:1 between the colours in the focus and unfocused state. And the adjacent contrasting area also has a contrast ratio of at least 3:1. The focus indicator uses a black border, so this meets the minimum area requirement of it being greater than 1 CSS pixel. And also when this element receives focus, it's not obscured, it's not hidden by any content, so it's clear to the user. So this example here does show how the requirements are being met, but I guess the key takeaway in relation to this criteria is to ensure that the visible focus stands out from the background, and a strong focus indicator is provided to the user. I'm just going to move on now to the next criteria. So here we're looking at focus appearance enhanced. This is WCAG 2.4.12, and this is AAA level criteria. And again, it falls within the navigable section within the WCAG guidelines. So this is an enhanced AAA success criteria. Essentially has the same purpose as the previous criteria that we've looked at, but it defines a higher level of visibility when using a focus indicator. So this includes a greater contrasting area ratio of at least 4.5:1 and a greater minimum area. So it should be at least double the area of a 1 CSS pixel. And no part of the focus indicator should be hidden by any content. So I guess this really highlights a higher level of visibility, which supports sighted users to visually determine what element they're interacting with, but also users that have got low vision are better able to follow a highly visible focus indicator. So next up, we've got page break navigation, WCAG 2.4.13, which is level A criteria. As Keith has mentioned, some of the criteria in the working draft has recently been updated, so some of them have been renamed. This is one of them. So this particular criteria was previously named fixed reference points, just to make that clear and to avoid any kind of confusion for anyone. and it falls within the navigable section of the guidelines again. So page break navigation. So the purpose of this criteria is to allow people using assistive technology to find references to content based on the page break locators, and that each locator maintains its place in the flow of content, and even when the formatting or say the platform changes, each locator remains in its, in its right place. I guess I've got an example here which might help to kind of demonstrate this better. So, for example, a student who has low vision and needs to increase the text size and spacing in an online textbook, and say, for example, the student is asked by the instructor to go to a particular page 37, for example. They realise that activity isn't actually on page 37 in their view. And to overcome this, the student uses a page contents list to get to page 37, which is actually page 53 in their view, and they're able to find that activity. So I guess this example demonstrates that people who need to adapt the display of content on their screen by using, for example, zoom text, should still be able to find their place and find references to content that are based on page numbers of the print or default version of the publication. So on the next slide, we've got an example here. So here is an example of an ebook which uses page numbers, which has been highlighted on the screen, and has a print version. And it includes page break locators to align with the print edition. And I guess this shows by using a page list and page break indicator, this allows users in a mixed print and digital environments to find their place within the publication. I'm just going to move to the next criteria now. So here we're looking at dragging, which is WCAG 2.2, and this is a AA criteria, and it falls within 2.5 input modality section. And the aim of this is to make it easier for users to operate functionality through various inputs. So the purpose of this success criteria is to ensure that all functionality that uses a dragging movement, so for example, using a slider or a drag and drop interface, has another single pointer mode of operation without the need of dragging the element. And this criteria is important and helpful for users that, for example, have mobility issues, that may experience difficulty or might be unable to perform a dragging motion, and therefore an alternative should be provided. So on the next slide, I've got an example here, which would be helpful to illustrate this, the requirements. So here, we've got an example of a drag and drop function. This is on Microsoft Teams, and it's using the Teams Planner application. So within Teams Planner, you've got task cards. So at the top of each task card, there is 3 dots that the user can access using the keyboard or the mouse. And this provides you with options to move a task to a different board within the planner. And you can do this by either a single click or keyboard gestures using those 3 dots. So this is an example of an alternative being provided to a drag option. I will just note here as well, just in terms of further improving the accessibility of this application, the 3 dots that are used, although it's very beneficial in this situation, they could be further improved because it might not be universally recognised by all users. So it might be helpful, you could use like a button instead, which is visually and programmatically clear to all users that that particular button will take you to more options and you can move the task card. So that's one example here. I've got another example on the next slide. So this is another positive example, and it's from the Energy Saving Trust website, and it's an alternative to dragging a pointer. So here the user is asked to select what number of bedrooms they have in a property, and there's a slider option, but as well as that there's a drop down which is accessible using the keyboard or a pointer, and the user is able to select an option in another way. That's another good example there. Just moving on now to target size. So target size minimum, and this is WCAG 2.2, and this is level AA. This one here has also recently been renamed. It was previously called pointer target spacing in the working drafts, and it also falls with the input modalities section within the guidelines. So the purpose of this success criteria is to ensure that targets can be easily activated without accidentally activating another target, which might be positioned closely to the one that you're looking to activate by mistake. So targets that are small, that can be difficult for users, especially people that have motor disabilities, to activate accurately. So providing sufficient spacing and sizing between snap targets will reduce the likelihood of accidentally activating the wrong control. Just want to point out there is existing criteria in target size 255, and that falls within AAA success criteria. But I guess this new success criteria differs from existing as it defines a minimum target, which is 24 by 24 CSS pixels. There are exceptions to this as well. So spacing, so if a target is smaller than 24 by 24 pixels, but there's sufficient spacing between the targets, then you would meet the requirements for this criteria. If the target is in a sentence or block, so for example, if you have text links inside a sentence or a paragraph, that would be okay as well. And also if the spacing of the targets is essential to the information being conveyed. An example of this could be like a digital map, and there's many pins within the map that are closely together, but it's essential to show that, because that accurately kind of displays the correct map location. So that's kind of an exception there. But I've got an example on the next slide. So this is documentation from the WCAG 2.2, which you can refer to, because I guess there's quite a lot to kind of take in and to remember when you're implementing a sufficient target size. So in the top line of this example, there's icons, and the dimensions of each of these icons is 44 by 44 CSS pixels, and there's no space in between, but because there's sufficient sizing there, and this passes the criteria. In the second row, we've got similar icons which are 24 by 24 CSS pixels. Again, no spacing between them, but due to the sizing, this again passes the criteria. And in the third row, the icons are 20 by 20 CSS pixels, but because there is spacing between them of 4 pixels between each icon, this will pass the criteria as well. And the last row there, so the same icons are used, and they're 20 by 20 CSS pixels, but there's no spacing between them. And because there's no spacing, that would result in a fail, and it wouldn't meet the requirements for this criteria. So I hope that kind of helps. And I guess it really highlights the importance of sufficient sizing and spacing between targets. We've got the WCAG documentation there to refer to help with this. Also, when implementing kind of target sizes, using like a min height and a min width within the CSS can be helpful. And there's also guidelines like the iOS human interface guidelines and the Android material design guidelines that you can refer to when trying to implement target sizes on mobile. I guess important to note, this doesn't test the target size on a page. It's more about when you're designing and implementing sufficient target sizes. Hope that makes sense there. I'm going to move on now to the next criteria, which is consistent help. And this is WCAG 2.2, and this is level A criteria, previously named findable help within the working draft. And it falls within 3.2 predictable section from the guidelines. So this helps to make web pages appear and operate in predictable ways. So the purpose of this success criteria is to ensure that users can find help for completing tasks, and this information is provided in the same relative order on each page. So this includes at least one form of help. So we've got a list here. So there's human contact details, and that could be, for example, a phone number or an email address. There's human contact mechanisms, so a contact form or a social media channel that the user can access. Self-help option, so that could be an up-to-date FAQs page or a support page. And a fully automated contact mechanism such as a chat box. So this criteria helps people may have difficulty locating help, and it's especially beneficial for people with cognitive difficulties. I guess they're focusing on actually completing the task as opposed to using up energy trying to find help or support information. And I guess a key takeaway here in relation to this criteria is to, if you're making a help option available, make sure it's available consistently in the same relative place, and it can be easily located. I have an example on the next page, on the next slide. So this is an example from the Energy Saving Trust website. Here, this page displays a progress bar, and at the top of the page, there's a further support button. And as you progress through the form and progress through the stages, the further support button remains consistently on that page in the same place. So the user knows where they are and where to find that button, which is good. So the next criteria we're looking at here is visible controls, WCAG 3.2.7, and this is AA level. This has also been renamed. It was previously called hidden controls, and it falls within the predictable section of the guidelines. So the purpose of this criteria is to ensure that user interface components, so controls, can be easily found by users, by all users, and particularly beneficial for users that have got cognitive disabilities, vision loss, mobility and motor impairments. So often controls can be hidden. For example, if you're like watching a video, and at times the controls can disappear, so you can need to hover around and find the buttons to control the video. So that could be something that the user needs to kind of find. But when controls are hidden, this can create difficulties for some users to discover those controls and to complete the task that they're looking to achieve. So it's important that controls are persistently available for users. We've got an example here on this slide. So this is an example of somebody composing an email using Gmail. And say, for example, if you want to change the colour or the font size of the text, there's a toolbar available, which is persistently available to the user. So the user doesn't need to find this, hover around the page, or try and find this on the page. It's persistently there for the user, which is particularly beneficial for users that have got cognitive and learning disabilities, as they can easily locate controls. Also, people that have got low vision don't need to combine visually trying to search for controls whilst moving their pointer or trying to find keyboard focus. And people with mobility and motor impairments don't need to use hover or focus to locate and operate controls. So I guess that can highlight the benefit of having that control there and it being available persistently. Okay. So I'm just moving on now to accessible authentication, which is WCAG 337, level A criteria, and this falls within 3.3 input assistance section within the WCAG guidelines. And I guess the overarching kind of like aim of that is to help users to avoid and correct mistakes. This particular criteria aims to ensure that there is an accessible, easy to use and secure method to log in and access content. So most websites do rely on usernames or passwords for logging in, and that information can place quite a high and sometimes impossible burden for people with certain cognitive disabilities. So it's important to have mechanisms in place to support users, and this could be support for password entry by using a password manager or allowing users to copy and paste passwords so they're not relying on memory to input that information. And I've got a few examples here. So this first example here is an example of poor authentication processes. So the first one, it's a security check, and this one here would be inaccessible for users to perceive the content screen on the screen. It's unsuitable for people with low vision and people with colour blindness, and there's no alternative provided to the user. And in the second example, which is a Google reCAPTCHA, this gives you an audio version, and it does give you help information, but I think this type of authentication can still be difficult for users, especially users that have got cognitive disabilities to understand and people with visual impairments. We have further examples in the next slides. So these are more accessible, these examples on this slide. So the first one is authentication using a face device scan, and this is on the Bank of Scotland online app. And the user doesn't need to input any information, it's just a scan which logs you into the app. And the second example is from using Outlook emails. So say, for example, you're opening up a secure email from someone outside of your organisation, you need to enter a one-time passcode. This is provided and the user is able to copy and paste this in order to view the message. It doesn't rely on memory. And we have another example on the next slide. So this is a further positive example. So this is provided by Medium. So this technique provides an easy way for users to authenticate without needing a password. So the user can enter the email on the website, and they are sent an email with a link to activate. So when the user activates that link in the email, they're directed back to the website and they automatically log in. So the user isn't forced to remember a password or manually enter information to log in. So that was a few examples there. I'm just going to move on now to the final success criteria, which is redundant entry, which is WCAG 338, and it also falls within 3.3 input assistance guidance. So this criteria ensures that users can successfully navigate multi-step processes, and it aims to reduce cognitive effort where information is asked more than once in a process. It also reduces the need to recall information provided in a previous step. So for example, if you're filling a form and any previously entered information should be available through either an auto-populated option, or there should be an option available for the user to select. There is an exception to this when re-entering the information is essential, and that could be for security reasons, but generally this should be avoided. Got an example here. So this is a example from gov.uk. The users asked if they have coronavirus symptoms on a previous screen, and then you're asked that same information on the following screen. I guess this example of information being repetitive and unnecessary as well. And on the next slide, I have an example, which is a positive example, which is provided by Amazon. So here, the user is asked to specify that their billing address is the same as their shipping address instead of having to re-enter all their delivery details. So this is a positive example, particularly beneficial for users who've got cognitive disabilities, don't have to repeatedly remember particular information. It reduces stress and the likelihood of mistakes occurring. And people that have mobility impairments, this is beneficial because they don't need to repeatedly enter information. So let's move on through online new success criteria. I'm aware that's quite a lot there that I've gone through, so thanks for listening. But I guess essentially the WCAG 2.2 is about making, the web accessible for users, particularly people with disabilities, and ensuring accessibility regardless of what technology you're using. But I will pass you back to Keith now, who's going to summarise today's session.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Harjeet. That was really informative. So yeah, I'd like you to go away now and start your WCAG 2.2 journey today. So the latest WCAG guidelines are just a variation of the theme, and the theme is removing barriers and making access possible for everyone. Now we recommend you move towards WCAG 2.2 as soon as possible, so that when these new guidelines are released, you will be ready to go. So you can start by setting up processes within your organization and train up your team on the new requirements. And by adopting WCAG 2.2 as quickly as possible, your organization can continue to raise the bar on accessibility. Thanks very much for listening, everyone. There's some resources here. We've got the documentation for the WCAG 2.2 guidelines. We've got the working drafts. We've got understanding WCAG 2.2 resource there, and I've mentioned it before, but yeah, you should all check out the Global Accessibility Awareness Day events page, this one here, if you've not done so already. One more thing I'd like to say before we go into the questions. A big thank you to Harjeet there for all of her work there, and I would just like to mention some upcoming courses that we've got coming up. So we've got the CPUX Foundation course starting on the 8th to 10th of June. We've got the Web Accessibility for Developers from the 23rd to 24th of June. And we've got Web Accessibility for Designers on the 21st of June. And if you scan the QR code there, that'll take you through to the training page on our website where you can book online. And there's a code there which you can apply for a 10% discount.